Our daily cancellation today begins with a report in the New York Post about a major and important controversy. Quote, an angry traveler has shared their frustrations over a woman who had the audacity, quote unquote, to request a seat swap so she could sit next to her kid. In a resurfaced Reddit post now going viral, the flummoxed flyer said that it was, quote, not my problem they didn't book together when asked to switch seats. The unidentified traveler was on a trans-Pacific flight from Japan, sitting in a window seat, while the toddler was in the middle seat. The tot's mom was in the row directly behind them, also seated in the middle. She asked me, quoting now, and just me, to switch with her so she could have my window seat next to her daughter and I'd have to take her middle seat a row back. The user wrote, hell to the F no. The peeved passenger continued in the post, worse is we were surrounded by others from her tour group that she could have asked for a three-way trade instead or the tour operator. The audacity to just ask me and expect an inferior trade on my side. Now, many of the comments on Reddit and on social media, as this critically important story has been shared far and wide, have come down against the man in the window seat, or the person in the window seat, claiming that it was his responsibility to forfeit the seat that he likely paid extra money for and accept a much less comfortable arrangement for a flight across the Pacific Ocean, all because some stranger he doesn't know failed to plan ahead. So as always, the internet jury has ruled incorrectly on this case. There are rules for seat trading on airlines, rules that this woman defied. In fact, there are many rules governing airline travel, rules that many people constantly flout. These are not rules made or enforced by the airlines themselves. They have their own rules, but these are rules that exist at a deeper level, rules that are written on the human heart. I'm not speaking about the laws of man, but rather natural laws, laws that we should all understand innately as human beings with rational souls. And if you don't understand these laws, then I will explain them to you right now. Okay, we have in the past touched on many different aspects of air travel, but it's become apparent to me that I need to provide one resource with all of the rules laid out in a clear and accessible format. And that's what we're going to do today. So this is the definitive list of rules, of laws for air travel. We'll deal with the question of seat swapping when we get there, but the rules begin well before you step foot on the plane. Now, in the interest of time, I'm only going to be able to cover the rules that govern the time when you wake up in the morning on the day of your flight to the moment when you sit in your seat on the plane. So this is the beginning of the definitive list, but it will not be the entire list. Okay, so let's proceed. Rule number one, you dress like a civilized, well-groomed adult. If you're not that kind of adult, then you need to pretend that you are. Nobody stumbles accidentally onto a plane. You have to book tickets, you have to pack, you have to engage in some kind of planning ahead of time. So there's no excuse to not be completely dressed and showered and presentable when you get on the plane. Now, if I knocked on your door in the middle of the night, well, you'd probably call the cops. But let's say that you answered the door. You'd be in your pajamas, maybe wearing slippers, hair messy, matted, teeth not brushed, blurry-eyed, unshowered, confused. And I could not complain about having to look at you in that disheveled and disgusting state because I knocked on your door in the middle of the night. But when I see you at the airport or on a plane, I did not knock on your door in the middle of the night. We are meeting out in public in a place we both paid money to be and planned ahead of time to be. So I should not have to be exposed to your middle of the night look. I should not have to see you in your pajamas wearing slippers and a bathrobe. This is an airport. It's not your bedroom. So put on some clothes, you sloppy freak. That's rule number one. Rule number two, on that note, there will be no sleeping in the terminal. Okay, I was at the airport a couple of weeks ago, sitting at the gate. By far not the first time this has happened. There's a man 5 feet from me, laid out on the ground, curled up in the fetal position. This is a grown man. Jacket pulled over him like a blanket, fast asleep. Now, once again, this is an airport. It's not your bedroom. It's also not a refugee camp. So forget about the fact that by sleeping on the ground at the airport, you are displaying an extremely unreasonable amount of faith in the airport's janitorial staff. The truth is that patch of floor you're lying on was probably last cleaned during like the first Bush administration. Not to mention you're displaying an even more unreasonable amount of faith in other people. Do you actually trust other humans enough to become voluntarily unconscious amid a huge crowd of them? Well, you shouldn't, but that's not even the point. The point is that I don't want to have to look at you like that. It's undignified. It's embarrassing. Okay? You can take a nap when you get to the hotel. The airport is a place for being awake and tired and miserable like the rest of us. Rule number three. So you got into the airport, you're awake, like everybody else, like a civilized adult. Now we're boarding the plane. When boarding the plane, remember that you are on stoplight time. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, when you're sitting at a stoplight and the light turns green and then a second passes and you still haven't moved, the cars behind you will start blaring their horns and screaming curses at you and throwing eggs and tomatoes at your windshield, and they will be morally justified in doing so. That's because at a stoplight, each second counts as 10 minutes. If you wait 2 seconds to move, you've actually been sitting there for 20 minutes. 3 seconds, it's been a half hour. And now it's both morally and, from what I understand, legally acceptable for the cars behind you to ram into you and force you through the intersection. Now, when boarding a plane, time works exactly the same way. It's not normal time. You have to understand that. You have less than 1 second, therefore, to stow your bags and get in your seat. Okay, you're getting on the plane, keep it moving, stow the bag, get your seat. You have less than a second to do it. If you bring a bag on board that doesn't fit in the overhead storage, and now we have to wait not only seconds, but even minutes, while the situation is resolved, you have, in effect, delayed us by years. We are years behind schedule because of you, and we hate you for it. One other note about boarding a plane. If you're running late for your flight and will now be boarding after everybody else has already taken their seats, you're not going to like this, but this is the rule. The rule dictates that you don't board at all. Your trip is canceled. You're not flying. Because first of all, you've held us all up, and now you have to pay the price for it. But also, second, the other people in your row now assume that you aren't coming. And they have experienced the joyful elation at the thought that they'll have extra space on their flight. It is deeply painful to believe that the person next to you isn't showing up, only to see them appear out of nowhere 5 seconds before the door's shut, sweaty, exhausted, like out of breath, happy that they made the flight. Totally unconcerned by the trauma that's being inflicted on you now that you realize that this sweaty person is going to be sitting next to you. So if you're running that late, you don't get to board. Rule number 4. To deal with the issue we began with, if you have a problem with your seat, you need to trade with somebody else on the flight, you may only propose a lateral trade. Window seat for a window seat, aisle for an aisle. Because I'm generous, I'll even allow you to propose a window for aisle or aisle for window trade. But what you cannot ever do under any circumstance is try to trade your middle seat for someone else's end seat. Too big a favor to ask of someone you don't know. It's like going up to some stranger in a parking garage and asking them to take your 2011 Toyota Corolla with a broken air conditioning and 150,000 miles on it in exchange for their luxury sedan. Well, I guess no seat on a modern airline is tantamount to a luxury sedan. So it's more like asking to exchange your beat-up, disgusting Toyota Corolla for a slightly less beat-up and disgusting Toyota Corolla. Either way, it's a laughable proposition, and it's inappropriate to even request. Rule number 5, finally for now. Once you're sitting in your seat, here are all the things you may not do. You may not lean back your chair. Seats are equipped with this function, but not because you're supposed to actually use it. The recline option on the seat is just there as a test to see who is a sociopath. If you hit the button, you fail the test. You may not eat any food that gives off a strong smell or makes any kind of sound. So this rule basically rules out all food except for plain white bread is all you're allowed to eat on the plane, if you're sitting next to me anyway. You may not speak to the person next to you unless you're spoken to, but they also are following the same rule, which means that nobody's speaking at all. If you're in the middle seat, as I've explained in the past, you have no privileges and no human rights. You are worse than a second-class citizen. You don't exist. This means that you don't have permission to use either of your armrests. Your superiors on the end get both of their armrests. You get nothing. You're also not allowed to inconvenience the aisle seat by getting up to use the bathroom. You must sit there, legs together, arms folded, head bowed down, in silence for the duration of the flight. Now, if you're sitting in the window seat, you need to use the bathroom. You may impose this inconvenience on the aisle seat, but only once per 6 hours of the flight. So if your flight is less than 6 hours, you're not permitted access to the bathroom at all. Now, this, as I said, only a partial list of rules. Enough to get you on the plane and seated. As for how to conduct yourself during the flight, how to get off the flight, well, we'll have to cover those rules at a different time. What I would recommend is that nobody take any flights at all until I've had a chance to cover the entire list of rules. For now, though, anyone who has ever violated rules 1 through 5 is, of course, banned from flying from here on out, and also, obviously, today, canceled. And that'll do it for this portion of the show. As we move over to the members block, become a member today by using code Walsh at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Hope to see you over the members block. If not, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.